So I am in no way a professional web designer, but I hope this video can give you a fundamental understanding of web design. So when you watch a YouTube video or read an article about it, you know what they're talking about. And sometimes taking the first step is one of the hardest things to do. There are probably three languages that you should learn when learning to design a website, and that's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML basically is the website. So, for example, if you have a paragraph you want to put in there, that's where you put it in. CSS is what makes your website look nice and also consistent throughout your website. So, if you have multiple web pages, they all look the same, aside from the content on it. And then JavaScript does a lot of the higher end things, like if you have a button, what does that do? So, a lot of the user interactions and much more. So, how do you write code? You can do it in any kind of text editor. Probably not in Google Docs, but you can do it in Word. You can do it in text edit, as I have right here. I wouldn't recommend these two, but if you do choose to do it in text edit, you need to go and change some of the settings. So go text edit, preferences, and make sure plain text is checked off, and make sure these aren't checked off. And then from here, you need to make sure that you click on format, then make plain text. It should say plain text. And your page should look like this. But that's a pain. Doing that is not worth it. In that time, I was explaining that you probably could have just downloaded something like Sublime Text. There are a lot of editors out there, but something like this helps you visualize because you can see a lot of the coloring and whatnot. It's easier to just see where everything is and whatnot. Also, a lot of them come with special features. For example, this will automatically indent for you, which is very neat and it saves a lot of time for you. So when you first open Sublime Text, it probably looks something more like this. But I typed already some of the code in there. I actually took it from a website called W3 Schools. This is a great website for learning HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and the other languages for web design. This is You need to use this website if you're learning it on your own. This is the basic structure of a website. So you have something that declares that it's an HTML page. You don't really need it. It still works, but it's a good habit to have it there. And then these tags right here. This one right here says, okay, this is where the HTML starts. And you see this backslash right here. This is where it ends. So, for example, this is the head, and this is where the head ends. You can never have something that starts within the head and ends outside the head. This is never gonna happen. You did something wrong if you do that. And you can see that here. Body starts inside the HTML and ends within the HTML. Same with these. This starts within the body and ends within the body. Head is something we can worry about later, but none of the code here really shows up in the web page itself. The body is where everything happens. We definitely need to use the head. For example, page title. Let's make this I don't know, home, because I'm not very creative. Then it'll probably turn out as home, and we already have this. I got that from W3 Schools. But anyway, one of the important things to know is actually how to save a web page. So I already saved it, which probably wasn't a good idea for demonstration purposes, so I'll save it again. It's really important that your text file ends in .html. If it doesn't, your text file basically is no different from just a text file where you take notes or you have a list of groceries. So you can call it whatever. You can call it, home.html or, first page.html. It's usually good practice to call your home page index.html or your start page index.html. I don't quite exactly know why, but I learned so I am telling you so. Anyway, after you name it, you can call it untitled or whatever you want. You just save it to the desktop, wherever, whatnot. And because I already have one called index, it's gonna say, do you want to replace it? It's kind of replacing itself, but whatever. So I saved it right here. Now let's just run this and see what happens. Let's open it. You can open in any browser you want to. I'm gonna open in Chrome because I have a bunch of stuff in Safari open, and this is what it looks like. So that's a web page, but right now it kind of looks boring and ugly. We need to do a lot more work. And so let me go back to the HTML file and explain to you what happens when you change the text. Let's say I'll write, this is a test. Nothing really happens here, right? So instead, you actually have to save the file. You can do Command S and then reload it. And now it shows up. So yeah, if you change anything, make sure to save and then reload. So let me explain some of the other stuff in here. For example, H1 is right here. It stands for heading 1. If you ever have any questions, I'd recommend that you go to something like W3 Schools and look it up. Or you can just Google it and a bunch of stuff will come up. You can ask questions like, how do you insert a picture into HTML? And then it'll come up. So this one says right here. And so, look, you actually see that H1 goes to H6. And they're all different types of heading. So let's try try it yourself, and you see that H1 is the biggest and it gets progressively smaller as you go to 6. They recommend that you only use headings for headings and not for something when you're bolding it. And this website also explains, does the browser support it? Some of the old stuff or some of the unique stuff are not supported by browsers, and that's very important because I might be doing all my testing in Chrome, but it might look really ugly on a Firefox for someone who's using Firefox, right? And that's very important, that you make sure that your web page looks the way it's supposed to. But as someone who's a beginner, I think that's not something we have to worry about too much. A lot of the basic stuff like H1 is actually basically the same throughout. But anyway, so that's H1. What is P? Well, how about I just show it to you? P stands for paragraph. So you see how there's a space right here. And it seems like it makes sense that there will be a space just because it's the next line. But let's say this is also a test. Save it, reload. It actually doesn't put it on the next row. So having a paragraph basically says, okay, this is a new paragraph. Please make, a new paragraph. So if I do this is a new paragraph. These will be separated on the top and bottom, but not these two right here, even though I hit return here. And I can do as much of this and it won't change anything. So you might be wondering what tags means, and all that is it's just, these are tags. These are all tags, actually. Well, not those, but these are tags, these are tags. It's kind of like the HTML specific stuff is in there. CSS and JavaScript don't use this, but it's always in the greater than and less than signs. It's just visually appealing. I think it's easier to see. But anyway, let's say we want to make our text bold. How do we do it? All you have to do is just make these bold tags, and you make sure to end it, because it's going to be a nightmare if you don't end these things. It's fine right now because all we're doing is bolding, but later on it's going to get really complicated, and if you miss one, you won't know where you missed it, and yeah, it'd be a pain in the butt. So let's make sure to save that and then reload it. And ta-da! It bolded. Let's say we didn't finish it and we're bad coders. Everything after this will be bolded. So even if I do a new paragraph, it'll be like hello, and we'll finish this, or we'll close this because we're not that bad. Yeah, and this is still bolded. But yeah, so make sure to do that. Some of the other ones are, whoopsies, I think I didn't save it. Oh no, why is it not? Oh, I didn't make it a closing tag. There we go. Here, that's perfect. And you also notice that it indented right here. The reason that happened is because when I hit enter, this bold tag hadn't ended yet because we haven't closed it. So that means that this is within the bold tag. And so that's why anything inside another tag is always indented one more. So for example, if I hit return here, here we go. If I hit return here, it'll be indented, and anything inside will be indented. But if I do it here, it's not indented because it's already outside the P. If I finish, the bold tag here, they'll actually line it up so the starting tag and the ending tag line up. And when I hit return, it's aligned with it because I'm within the body tag. Nothing else is open here, so within the body tag, I'm one indentation to the right. They don't really indent the body, I guess, just because you can see the HTML code tags right there. There's nothing really in between the HTML and the head, or the HTML and the body anyway. And this is not something you really need to do for your code to work. You know, you could just make it really look ugly, and you can do this, and you know, your website won't change when I reload it. Besides the fact that it was bolded. Okay, well, let's say I do this. Nothing changed. The only thing is when you come back, like, you know, especially if you haven't looked at it in a while, or if someone else is looking at it, it's just much easier to understand when it's indented well. So, it's always good for me. I like to go here and just click re-indent, and it'll do all the indenting for you. And I'll just make it look even nicer. Yeah, and that's really important. Let's move this back here and hit re-indent. For italics and underline, all it is just I and close I, and then U. Well, let me actually just demonstrate it. Hello. And then U and U. And make sure if something starts within the I, it has to end within the I. Make sure you do that. And you see that it's italics and underlined, and you can also bold it too. Oh, whoops, not just bold B. Bolded. Let's say I write hello. What do you think is gonna happen? If you guess that it's just gonna be italicized, you're right. It's not underlined because it's not within the U or the B. And if I write something like pop, ta-da! It's not bolded. So that's some of the text decoration stuff. I think this gives you an understanding of how HTML works at a very, very, very basic level. But now you can just basically look up tags and figure it out from there. So if you go to the W3 schools, they actually have a list of all the tags for HTML. This alone won't, you don't know what like KBD is. Obviously you need to like look into it more, but you get the basic understanding. So actually, it says it's not supporting HTML5. Wow, things have changed since I first started, but it's still supported in Chrome. So let's try it. So let's try this center tag. Go back to Sublime, and let's put it right here, and put it right here, and make sure it closes, and re-indent it. Save and reload. And ta-da! It's at the middle of the screen. If you go this way, it actually adjusts with it. It makes a lot of sense. But it says it's not supporting HTML5. I think there's a push to make everything in HTML if you can, just because it's just a better way of doing things. It declutters the HTML, and yeah, we'll teach you all that later on. So I mentioned adding images. We could look it up here, but I actually know the tag. It's img. So let's look it up. Okay, right here, defines an image. So here is the code right here. Let's just copy it and then bring it over here, and let's put it right here. So how does this all work? So first of all, you're saying, okay, this is an image, and then you're saying this is a source. How does that work? We need to go back to desktop, go to where I keep my file. This is the web page that we're making, and I actually just placed an images folder. It's usually a good idea to keep all your images in one folder, or have some kind of organization scheme. Once you have more web pages, you have CSS. It's good to just have everything in a folder. So I made a folder called images. And it's also a good idea to keep everything in lower caps and not use spaces. It can cause some problems because sometimes computers don't read the content the same way. So spaces can kind of get messed up in some of the translation. So just avoid spaces. If you want spaces, either just combine the word or use something like underscore or something like that. Yeah. And within it, so within the folder, I have two images. Let me just copy this right here. It's called logo7.png. So normally, if you have a picture in this folder, in the same folder as the file that you're typing in, so right here, then you just need to type the name of the file. But I actually have it within a folder that's in the folder with this file. So it's right next to it, and then you go into it, if that makes sense. So in that case, I actually need to tell it which folder it's in. Whoopsies. So I need to write images / then let's say I want the logo7 small.png. This is just a logo I played with when I was making my my recipe website. And then alt, that's basically a text that comes up when you hover over it. In case your picture doesn't load, this is important. So let's just call it logo. And then you can actually define the height and the width, but you also don't have to. So let's do it without defining it right now. And reload the page. And ta-da! It comes up. The size is just the size of the picture itself. And so if I use the one that's not small, it will be massive. So yeah, usually it's good to define in case to make sure it looks the way it should. So if I define it, it's only 42 pixels by 42 pixels, which is actually pretty small. Perfect. And you can see that the center tag actually worked on the image as well as the text. If we move this outside the center tag, now it's actually just on the left side. One thing that's important to keep in mind when putting images in your website is that a lot of times your user may have a bad internet connection, or they might be on their phone. So loading a picture actually might take a while, and it might use up a lot of their data if they're on their phone. So you have to be really mindful. You want to make your pictures as small as possible without sacrificing quality, or maybe you have to sacrifice quality because you see here that my picture is only 42 pixels by 42 pixels, but you saw how gigantic that photo was. For example, you see the difference is massive. It's not just twice as big in terms of size, but it's 20 times bigger. And the size, this is the size difference. And 42 pixels even actually smaller than this picture. So there's no reason for the person to have to load this whole picture to show a small 42 by 42 pixel picture. So you might as well make it 42 by 42 beforehand. I think it's not bad to, still say it's 42 by 42 just in case something happens. It'll still show up the way it's supposed to. But make sure to make everything as small as possible. That also means that code should be as concise as possible. Always make your code shorter if you're doing something more complicated, that is. For now, image size is not a big deal just because we're just dealing within our computer, and within our computer, our hard drives are fast enough that it won't take that long to load. And also, we have a lot of storage compared to how much data we might have per month. So that wraps up the first video. It was just a bunch of random things. I hope this kind of gave you an idea of how this all works. And now that you know how this works, now you can just go Google whatever you want to find. For example, how do you make your text upside down? Or How do you add links to your website? I hope to make another video, but until then, you should just play around and see what happens. Good luck.